So Iceland has had a lot of activism in terms of sort of freedom of speech, and it's something that you've sort of started to build into your constitution. How did that come about?
Well, we had a really good crisis in 2008 when we went from being the most developed country in 2007, according to the UN, to a Zimbabwe status when we had the third largest financial collapse in the history of humankind. And during that process, people actually realized that everything we had laid our trust in had failed us, be it the media, the academia, the politicians, the regulatory system, and so forth. And that created an incredible opportunity for, proper changes. I had read a book by Naomi Klein called The Shock Doctrine and realized that during times of shock and crisis, there was a profound chance that we could go backwards. And many other people were aware of this fact, and we decided to just immediately after the crisis found grassroots groups in order to investigate what we could do. And the main keyword to understanding what we really need to do first was to acquire more transparency and accountability. And so we created a group that wanted to organize all the different grassroots groups. All of a sudden, I've been an activist all my life, and it's always the same people protesting. So all of a sudden, there were all these new people, and we wanted to empower them by figuring out what do we have in common, what are the most important things to achieve. And somehow we decided to create a political movement, which I helped create, and our main objectives were democratic reform and financial reform and so forth. Very simple stuff, hit and run, go into the system and get out before you get corrupted. And we were created 8 weeks prior to elections. We didn't have any money, we're just ordinary citizens, and we want to build a bridge and open the windows inside the parliament, a bridge between the public and the republic. And we got 7.2% of the vote, and I think a lot of the following we got was we understood how the system worked, how to get on the live debates, and of course we used social media a lot. And there were lots of people that are sort of the pioneers in Iceland in the new media and in the internet that really wanted to push forward for more direct democracy. And as a result of us getting in and being the annoying fly in the tent in the parliament, I went in there with the mentality of the hacker or the hacktivist to really investigate the system and see the flaws and weaknesses in order to either improve them or expose them. And one of the main flaws I saw that was very bad Freedom of Information Act and very bad sort of understanding on the importance of empowering the general public to help us co-create a new Iceland. And there were many others that saw this. And so, because I'm also the only nerd in the parliament, I was invited in 2009 to speak at a conference with people that have become actually quite known to The Guardian, Julian Assange and Daniel Domscheit-Berg, then Smith. We're all speaking at this conference, and they were talking about an idea that John Perry Barlow, the co-founder of the EFF, presented a year earlier, always ahead of his time, so nobody really picked up on the idea until a year later. And it was an idea on making Iceland into sort of, instead of like a transparency haven or safe haven for freedom of information. And Julian and Daniel had sort of advanced this idea, and me being a new legislator, understanding this concept of cherry-picking all the best laws in the world for freedom of information, expression, and speech could be possible in this landscape of the crisis. And so I approached them and said, let's do it.
So just stepping back a moment, what were some of the tactics, techniques you used, and what were some of the messages that you used to reach, you said, I like the formulation, to connect the Republic and the public. So what were some of those tactics, techniques, tools, and was it purely technology, or obviously there was some political organizing, as you say, you're kind of a hacktivist from way back?
Well, by understanding how the system works, so we understood, for example, in order for us to get on the live debates on the TV, which got obviously the best opportunities to reach to as many people as possible, we had to run in every constituency. And that was a lot of legwork. We had 8 weeks, so we had to get organized quickly, and we could do that both through social media and technology, and of course a lot of legwork, and people really enthusiastic about change. And another thing that we really wanted to put a lot of effort into, and that was not to become like the politicians, just be human beings, and sometimes we even admitted that we didn't know the answer to the questions, and that really got that gave us the biggest following in understanding how the system worked and utilizing it for the activists.
So I'm curious, you said that you had to run in all the constituencies, and that was a key threshold. Were there any other thresholds that you had to meet or criteria you had to meet? I say that as an American, because obviously in the presidential debates there, you have to poll, I think, about 5% to take part. So what was the threshold of support that you had to have, or is there a threshold in Iceland?
Well, not prior to elections. Obviously, you have to get the people to support it, which is always easy because everybody supports sort of the democratic process. You just have to make sure that people don't support more than one party. But the threshold to get representatives inside the parliament is that you have to get more than 5% of the vote. But we have actually changed now the law, so even if you don't get 5%, you will still get some endorsement if you go through the entire process, so you don't get bankrupt experimenting with democracy. So if you get like 2% of the vote, you will get some financial support from the state.
So thinking about what Ahmed said, and sort of, they were starting in 2004, in 8 weeks, was there anything before that period of time that you had in place that allowed you to kind of coalesce that quickly? Or was it just...
No, nothing. Well, we had meetings and stuff like, various groups trying to figure out how we can apply ourselves through the grassroots and organizing, obviously, the protests and so forth, and debates about what we wanted instead. So we had actually formulated an agenda and reached an agreement where we were in agreement. Because the hardest thing of all is to organize grassroots groups. I worked a lot in the environmental grassroots groups, and just to try to get the civil disobedient people and the academians to sort of come together and support each other's actions was hell. And then to get the grassroots after the collapse in Iceland to work, that was a miracle that we actually managed to do that, and I still don't understand. I mean, it's all splitted now, and I don't know how many parties are going to be for the next elections. So it's always, we have to remember that the crisis is such an important opportunity, and it's such a small window. So if we have a really good crisis, the window is bigger, but it's always a short period of time. So I think it's, because we're heading into really good, juicy crisis in Europe now, we should be ready with good laws, and we can write laws even if we're not in parliament. We can bring each other together on an agenda on what we feel is important and priorities. I think the single most important democratic reform we could have in our world, in any society, is to open up the so-called law sausage. Because if we know who writes what bit of the laws, and particularly when they're in the ministries, it would be a lot easier for journalists and parliamentarians on the floor to make sure that there are no bad loopholes on it to be taken advantage of by certain lobbyists.